All right, Gator fans. This is basically a trash talking videos, and I'm gonna post it on here. So I'm gonna cut right into it. There was an FSU fan back in August, and I know we probably shouldn't take troll accounts on social media too seriously nowadays. But there was a FSU fan referred to as Seminole PJ on X or Twitter, whichever you want to call it. And he said on August 6th of 2024, last year, before the season started, mind you, that if FSU had UF's 2024 schedule, they would have went 11-1. Needless to say, that did not age well. FSU went 2-10 last year, and their schedule was in the ACC. They went up against Georgia Tech, Boston College, Memphis, California, SMU, Clemson, Duke, Miami, North Carolina, Notre Dame, Charleston Southern, Florida Gators. All that to win only 2 games. And in the Cal game, they only won by like 5 points. And they only scored 14 points. It was just Cal's kicker missed a couple of key field goals that would have kept the game in within reach for Cal in that game. Well, technically 5 points is still within reach, but if he would have made at least one of those field goals, they would have had a chance to go for a game-winning field goal at the end. But because he missed 2, they had to go for the touchdown. But that's neither here nor there. The fact is, Cal lost. Florida obviously went 8-5. Lost to Miami, beat Stanford, lost to Texas A&M, beat Mississippi State, beat UCF, lost to Tennessee, beat Kentucky, lost to Georgia and Texas, and then ended the year on a 4-game win streak, beating LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State, of course, and getting their Billy Napier's first bowl win against Tulane to 8-5 record. Now, I'm not going to say that 8-5 is good by either one of these program standards, but I certainly would prefer 8-5 over going 2-10 any day of the week. And this video is basically going to be just making fun of FSU fans and trying to figure out how many losses would FSU's team had if they had Florida's schedule. Because this guy said they were going to go 11-1 in Florida's schedule Florida's schedule. So that's really what this is. So we're gonna just go by game what FSU's record would have been. So obviously they lost to Miami and Florida. They played both Miami and Florida on the schedule, so that's 2 losses right off the gate. I think another sure-handed loss would have been on the road at Tennessee, so you can make that 3. Georgia and Texas wouldn't have been close. That would have been 5 losses at this point in the season for FSU. LSU, very unlikely. They would have beaten that team. Ole Miss did lose to Kentucky, but Kentucky, at the very least, had a respectable defense, so they kind of shut down Ole Miss's game. FSU wouldn't have done that defensively, so that would have been a blowout loss for Florida State as well. And so Miami, Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, Texas. Let me start over. Miami, Florida, Tennessee, then Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss. So that was 7 losses right out the gate. Texas A&M, I think they would have gotten blown out in that game too, because Texas A&M, after losing their opener to Notre Dame, they went on a 7-game win streak that year. So playing Texas A&M at the time that Florida had played Texas A&M, Florida State would have gotten Texas A&M at the time that they were playing at their hottest, and they probably would have gotten blown out. I did a little stat research, and FSU gave up 49 sacks to FBS opponents in 2024. Only California and Oklahoma were worse, and Texas A&M had 3 defensive linemen drafted in the first 2 rounds of this recent NFL draft. Shamar Stewart in the first round to the Bengals, and then 2 more in the second round, with Nico Skirton going to the Panthers at the end of the second round, and Shamar Turner to the Chicago Bears a few picks beforehand. So they would have eaten that FSU offensive line alive and sacked the quarterback at least half a dozen times, probably in one half. So I would put that as a loss for Florida State. Samford, that was the one team outside of Cal that FSU beat was an FCS school in Charleston Southern. Even though they were a terrible FCS school by FCS standards, they were 1-11. Samford wasn't much better, 4-8. I would have given FSU a victory there. You had Mississippi State. They were 2-10, winless in conference play. FSU, as bad as they were, didn't do that. They were 1-7 in conference play. Mississippi State, on the other hand, was completely winless, going 0-8. Maybe you can give Florida State a victory there. I would say, okay, so 2 wins at this point. So they've already matched their total. UCF was terrible, 4-8. I would put my money and say, based off of talent, FSU, because FSU wasn't a untalented team. They certainly weren't a deep team, last year. Like once you got past a few players, it was a drop off to the next guy, and that was just with the starters. Their backups weren't much better, and they certainly weren't coached well. Hence, by the fact that Mark Neville made such an overhaul to his coaching staff. So I'll still give Florida State. I meant to say FSU, Florida State, a victory here against UCF. So 3-9 in Kentucky. I'm kind of 50-50 on this game, but to be nice, I'll say Kentucky loses to Florida State maybe. So all in all, I think Florida State would have had at minimum 8 losses with Florida's schedule, with as bad as they played last year, and it's not really that much of an improvement. I think they still would have gotten blown out crazily in like 5 or 6 of those losses. So I think Florida State's over under loss would have been 8. It wouldn't surprise me if they did lose another game like that to maybe Kentucky or UCF or maybe even Mississippi State to go 3-9. But if you swap the schedules, I think Florida State would probably have had at a minimum 8 losses with Florida's schedule. And I really don't care to know how many wins Florida would have gotten if they had FSU schedule, because, well, they probably would have amounted the same. You know, definitely would have beaten Boston College at Memphis, definitely would have beaten Cal. Charleston Southern, that's easy. North Carolina was good. Duke was good by their standards, but Florida was a way more talented team. So, but anyways, I think it's just another excuse to take a jab at Florida State. So, yeah, they would have won 11-1 with our schedule. They probably would have won a couple more games than they did in their schedule with U.S. schedule, but I think 8 losses minimum would have been their a 4-8 record would have been their best record. Probably worse than that. So that's really it. This is just to simply poke fun at FSU. So you don't bleed orange and blue if you don't hate Florida State.